The wind howled through the pines surrounding Dominic Vega's cabin like a wounded animal. 3 years of self-imposed isolation in the Cascade Mountains had taught him to read the sky, and tonight's bruised clouds promised the season's first severe storm. He secured the shutters and checked his generator one final time before retreating indoors. Photography equipment littered his living room, the remnants of that afternoon's work cataloging the migration patterns of the local elk population. At 34, Dominic had built a modest reputation for wildlife photography that allowed him to live comfortably off-grid, which suited him perfectly. Human interaction had become complicated after his return from documenting conflict zones overseas. The animals were simpler. They didn't ask questions about the shadows behind his eyes. The first crack of thunder rattled the windows. Rain followed, hammering against the roof with enough force to drown out his thoughts. Dominic welcomed it, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey while his dinner heated on the wood stove. The sound that pierced through the storm's fury wasn't thunder. It was something else, a high-pitched whine followed by a concussive thud that shook the cabin's foundation. Curiosity overwhelmed caution. Grabbing his raincoat and flashlight, Dominic stepped onto the porch. The beam cut through sheets of rain, catching a faint blue glow approximately 50 yards downslope. Dominic slipped and cursed his way through the mud, convinced he'd find a downed aircraft or perhaps a meteorite. What he found instead defied explanation. She lay crumpled beside a smoking metal object no larger than a canoe. The rain sizzled against the craft's surface, creating a ghostly steam. But it was the woman, if that term applied, who captured his full attention. Her skin gleamed like polished copper in his flashlight beam. Blonde curls, almost white gold in color, were matted with a substance that resembled blood but shimmered with an iridescent quality. Her features were humanoid but subtly alien. High cheekbones too symmetrical, eyes slightly larger and almond-shaped beneath closed lids. "Jesus Christ," Dominic whispered, his breath clouding in the suddenly cold air. A laceration across her abdomen pulsed with weak blue light. Whatever she was dying. Every instinct screamed at him to call authorities, but the nearest phone was 20 miles away, and something told him this wasn't a situation for government intervention. Instead, Dominic carefully lifted her surprisingly light form. Her skin felt warm despite the rain, warmer than human temperature, like holding a sun-heated stone. Inside the cabin, Dominic gently placed her on his bed. The bleeding had slowed, but her breathing came in shallow gasps. Working methodically, he cleaned the wound with what supplies he had. The cut sealed slightly under his ministrations, suggesting remarkable healing abilities. Hours passed. The storm raged on. Dominic kept vigil from a chair beside the bed, camera forgotten, whiskey untouched. Dawn broke with tentative gold fingers of light stretching across the horizon when her eyes finally opened. They were amber, not brown or hazel, but true metallic amber with flecks of gold. Those eyes fixed on him with undisguised terror. "You're safe," Dominic said softly, raising empty palms in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I won't hurt you." She scrambled backward until she hit the headboard, lips forming words in a language like wind chimes and rushing water. When Dominic didn't respond, she touched her wound and then looked at him, confusion replacing fear. "I helped," Dominic said, miming bandaging. "You were hurt." Understanding dawned in those remarkable eyes. Slowly, she extended one copper hand toward him, palm up. After a moment's hesitation, Dominic placed his hand in hers. The connection felt like static electricity and summer heat. A single word formed in his mind, unfamiliar yet somehow comprehensible. "Ilara." Her name. For 3 days, Dominic watched Ilara heal at an astonishing rate. The wound that should have been fatal closed to a thin silver line across her copper skin. They established a rudimentary form of communication, her touch allowing flashes of understanding to pass between them, his patience drawing out her first halting words in English. "Danger," she said on the 4th morning, the word awkward on her tongue. "People hunt." Dominic nodded, understanding flowing both ways now. "Why?" Ilara's face contorted with concentration. Her fingers brushed his temple and images flooded his mind. A planet with twin moons, cities of crystalline towers, then fire and destruction. Ships fleeing. Hunters in dark uniforms, a desperate escape. "Refugee," he supplied. Her nod confirmed his understanding. That afternoon, while gathering firewood, Dominic spotted the black SUVs on the logging road below his property. Government vehicles moving with purpose. Something about the wounded craft must have registered on their sensors. His decision came without conscious thought. He would protect her. "They're coming," he warned upon returning. "We need to hide your ship." Working through the twilight hours, they dragged components of her escape pod into his root cellar. Her strength, despite her recent injury, amazed him. When the final piece was concealed, Alara collapsed against him, exhaustion evident in her amber eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, the words warming something long dormant inside him. That night, as headlights swept across his property, Dominic instructed Alara to hide in the attic crawlspace. The officials, claiming to be from the forestry department but with telltale earpieces and sidearms, questioned him about unusual sightings. Dominic played the part of the eccentric hermit photographer perfectly, showing them his wildlife images and rambling about elk migration until they departed, suspicious, but without cause to search his property. When he helped Alara down from the attic, her relief manifested as tears, droplets that glittered like liquid gold in the lamplight. Without thinking, Dominic brushed one away with his thumb. The contact sent a pleasant shock through his system, like champagne bubbles in his veins. "Safe now?" she asked, standing closer than humans typically would. "For the moment," he answered honestly. That night, unable to sleep, Dominic found Alara studying his bookshelves, fingers trailing over spines with reverent curiosity. When she selected a tattered collection of poetry, he began reading aloud. Her delight was palpable, warming the room like an additional hearth. "Your words, beautiful," she murmured, leaning against his shoulder. Something fragile was forming between them, a connection that transcended species and language. As autumn painted the surrounding forest in amber hues that matched her eyes, Dominic realized his self-imposed exile had ended the moment he carried her through his door. Each day brought new discoveries. Alara absorbed English with remarkable speed. Dominic learned that her people, the Larathi, possessed mild empathic abilities, explaining the sensations he felt at her touch. They shared meals, walks in the forest, and increasingly, personal histories. His tales of photographing conflict zones resonated with her experiences of fleeing her war-torn world. "Both survivors," she said one evening, her fingers intertwining with his across the table. The gesture, so human yet charged with an alien electricity, left Dominic breathless. The walls he'd built since returning from overseas began crumbling beneath her curious gaze. For the first time in years, he felt the dangerous stirring of hope. October bled into November, bringing the first dusting of snow and temperatures that plummeted at night. Dominic noticed Alara growing lethargic as the cold deepened, her copper skin losing its lustrous glow. "My people absorb solar energy," she explained, huddled near the wood stove. "Your sun is compatible but winter." That night, Dominic surrendered his bed entirely to her, taking the couch despite her protests. He woke hours later to find her standing in the doorway, trembling. "Cold," she whispered, "so cold." Without words, Dominic lifted his blanket in invitation. Alara slid beneath the covers, her body radiating an unnatural chill. Instinctively, he pulled her close, sharing his warmth. The contact sent pleasant waves of sensation coursing through him, her empathic abilities creating a feedback loop of comfort and something deeper, unnamed but powerful. Morning found them still entwined, Alara's copper cheek pressed against his chest, her white gold curls spilling across his arm. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his with no trace of embarrassment. "Your heartbeat," she murmured, placing her palm against his chest. "Strong, safe." The arrangement became their new normal as winter tightened its grip. Each night, they shared not only warmth but increasingly intimate conversations. Alara spoke of her homeworld's customs, of stars Dominic had never seen, of a culture built on emotional connections rather than spoken agreements. "My people know truth through touch," she explained one night, her fingers tracing patterns on his arm that left trails of tingling warmth. "Words can lie, bodies cannot." Dominic swallowed hard. "And what does my body tell you?" Her amber eyes held his in the firelight. "Conflict, desire, fear." "Of what?" "Of wanting something impossible." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I feel the same." The kiss, when it finally happened, felt inevitable, like gravity or the turning of seasons. Her lips were warmer than human temperature, tasting faintly of electricity and honey. The contact deepened her empathic connection, surrounding them in a bubble where sensation doubled and redoubled, his pleasure becoming hers and returning magnified. They pulled apart, breathless and stunned by the intensity. "Is this wrong?" Dominic asked, suddenly uncertain. "You're not human, I don't want to take advantage." Alara silenced him with a finger against his lips. "My people believe souls recognize each other across any distance, even between stars." Snow continued falling outside, insulating them from the world beyond. In their isolation, differences of species seemed insignificant compared to the deepening bond between them. Dominic taught Alara photography, marveling at how she captured images that revealed the energy within subjects rather than merely their surfaces. She taught him meditation techniques that allowed him glimpses of her empathic perception. December arrived with blizzards that made the cabin an island in a sea of white. The government vehicles hadn't returned, but both knew it was only a matter of time. Neither spoke of the future beyond these snowbound days and firelit nights. To acknowledge the precariousness of their situation seemed tempting fate. Instead, they created a sanctuary in the present tense, building a shared language of touch and glance that needed no translation. The helicopter's thundering approach shattered their morning peace. Dominic recognized the unmarked black craft immediately, not forestry officials this time, but something more specialized, more dangerous. "They've found us," he said, pulling Alara from the window. "We need to go now." Years of photographing in conflict zones had taught Dominic preparedness. The backpacks were already packed: emergency supplies, cold-weather gear, his satellite phone, and the small silver device from Alara's craft that she insisted they salvage. Within minutes, they were pushing through the snow-laden forest behind the cabin, heading toward the higher elevations where Dominic knew of abandoned mining shelters. Behind them, the helicopter landed. Men in tactical gear spilled onto his property. "They sensed the energy signature," Alara explained between labored breaths as they climbed. "My kind leaves traces." The mountain trail narrowed as they ascended, ice making each step treacherous. Alara struggled, her biology unsuited to the bitter cold despite the layers Dominic had wrapped her in. When she stumbled, he caught her, alarmed by the dullness creeping into her normally luminous eyes. "Just a little further," he encouraged, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The storm was intensifying, visibility decreasing with each passing minute. The crack of a rifle echoed through the canyon. Dominic felt the bullet's passage before he heard it, disturbing the air inches from his head. Their pursuers had spotted them. "Run," he shouted, pulling Alara behind an outcropping of rock. Two more shots pinged against stone. Trapped and exposed on the mountainside, their options dwindling with the daylight. Dominic calculated their chances and found them wanting. "Listen to me," he told Alara, cupping her face in his gloved hands. "I'm going to draw them off. The shelter is half a mile ahead. Hide there until—" "No," her amber eyes flared with sudden intensity. "Together." Before he could argue, Alara pressed something into his palm, a smooth crystal from a pocket near her heart. Her hands enveloped his around it, and warmth flooded his system despite the freezing air. "Trust me," she whispered. The pursuing agents were 50 yards below now, advancing cautiously up the path. Alara closed her eyes in concentration. The crystal between their joined hands pulsed with building energy. When she opened her eyes again, they blazed like twin suns. A wall of blinding light erupted outward, followed by a sound like 1,000 wind chimes. When Dominic's vision cleared, the mountainside below had transformed into a labyrinth of phantasmal images, dozens of false trails and illusory figures moving in different directions. "A distraction," Alara explained, swaying weakly. "Temporary." Dominic caught her as she collapsed, understanding what the effort had cost her already depleted reserves. Gathering her in his arms, he pushed onward through the deepening snow, leaving their confused pursuers behind. The mining shelter appeared as dusk approached, a simple stone structure half buried in the mountainside. Inside, Dominic worked frantically to start a fire in the ancient stove, wrapping Alara in every available layer and holding her against his chest. "Stay with me," he pleaded, rubbing warmth back into her copper limbs. As the shelter gradually warmed, color returned to her face. Her eyes fluttered open, finding his in the firelight. "You carried me," she whispered. "Always," he promised. That night, huddled together against both cold and fear, they surrendered completely to the connection that had been building between them. Their joining transcended physical intimacy, her empathic abilities dissolving the boundaries between them until Dominic couldn't tell where his consciousness ended and hers began. In that merging, they found a sanctuary more secure than any hiding place. Morning brought clear skies and the realization that they couldn't run forever. "My sister might help us," Dominic said, turning the satellite phone over in his hands. "Myra works for SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. She's brilliant, idealistic, but most importantly, connected." Alara studied his face with those perceptive amber eyes. "You trust her with my life." "With both our lives," he affirmed, dialing a number he hadn't called in years. The conversation was brief, guarded, filled with coded references from their childhood. When it ended, Dominic exhaled slowly. "She'll meet us 2 days at the observatory on Blackridge Pass." They traveled by night, avoiding roads and settlements. Twice they spotted search parties in the valleys below. Alara's strength returned gradually with each hour of daylight, her copper skin absorbing solar energy even through winter clouds. The observatory rose from the mountaintop like a sentinel, its white dome gleaming in the morning sun. Myra waited alone in the deserted parking lot, her expression shifting from professional detachment to astonishment when she saw Alara fully. "My God," she whispered, "you're actually—" "Yes," Dominic confirmed, "and the people hunting her aren't interested in scientific discovery." Inside the facility's conference room, terms were negotiated. Myra could arrange protection, documentation, a controlled introduction to carefully selected officials, but Alara would need to share information, knowledge about her propulsion systems, energy technologies, and homeworld. "A fair exchange," Alara agreed, "but with conditions. The technology cannot be weaponized, and Dominic stays with me." The second condition proved more controversial than the first. 2 weeks of debriefings, medical examinations, and closed-door meetings followed at a secure facility. Dominic refused to leave Alara's side despite pressure from various agencies. Their relationship became the subject of whispered debates and ethical considerations. "They question if it's real," Dominic observed one night in their monitored quarters. "If we can truly understand each other across such differences." Alara's fingers traced the now familiar path along his jaw. "Should we show them?" The demonstration of their empathic connection, Alara linking hands with both Dominic and Myra to create a three-way understanding, changed everything. The evidence of genuine communication, of emotional comprehension beyond language, transformed Alara from specimen to person in the eyes of many officials. Spring arrived with new possibilities. Reports emerged of other refugees, scattered across the globe, survivors of the same conflict that had driven Alara to Earth. A proposal was developed for a settlement in the American Southwest, where the desert climate mimicked aspects of their homeworld. "A colony of exiles," Alara mused as they toured the proposed site. "A beginning, not an ending." The first structures rose quickly, a blend of Earth architecture and adapted designs from Alara's memories. Other Lorathi arrived, escorted by governments now competing for access to their knowledge rather than seeking to control it. Each new arrival brought pieces of a culture that might otherwise have been lost to the stars. Dominic and Alara's dwelling sat at the community's edge, half Earth house, half Lorathi sanctuary, with large windows facing both the rising and setting sun. His photography studio adjoined a meditation space where she taught human scientists the basics of empathic sensing. "Do you regret it?" Alara asked him one evening as they watched distant lightning illuminate the desert. "Choosing this life instead of returning to your mountains?" Dominic's answer came without hesitation. "Home isn't a place." His fingers intertwined with hers, the familiar electric warmth flowing between them. "It's where barriers break down, where impossible things become possible." Above them, stars emerged in a copper-tinged sky, some familiar, others representing worlds Dominic would never see except through the memories Alara shared in their deepest connections. Different origins, different biologies, yet here they stood, building something unprecedented between their worlds. A bridge made of understanding, a future written in starlight.